It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between, along with our own Periscope girl. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Hey, hey, ho, 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 hee. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are ya? Hope everybody had a good holidays. I know I did. Very relaxing, just didn't do too much, but was good. I think that's what holidays should be all about, not to overexert yourself. So anyways, we got a good show for you today. What I thought I would do for the next few shows, over the course of the past 6 months or so, we've had some amazing musicians on the show. You know, it didn't really do them justice just to play their music once. So what I thought I would do is sort of a pseudo music review, play a couple of songs, one from each artist who's been on the show, and just play their songs again because their music was so good. It's well worth playing again. So today we're going to do 3 songs, and the 3 songs we're going to play are called Freedom by Bradley Kohn, Carrie Ann by Acme Giants, and 25 Hours by Gande. And these are really amazing songs, amazing artists, and I just really wanted to give them another shot on the show and another play because the music certainly deserves it. So we'll be doing that. I also wanted to mention that the Dusty Cover Show is still doing the Amazon drawing. We're up to 45 followers now. Once we get to 100, we will do the drawing. So what you have to do is you have to go to Spreaker, Spreaker.com/user/Dusty Cover Show and follow the show. Click on follow. Use a valid email address. Once we get to 100 followers, we will do the drawing and we will announce the winner, and you'll have 24 hours to contact us to win your $20 Amazon gift certificate. And you'll have $20 to spend on Amazon on whatever you like. So please do that. Please follow the Dusty Cover Show. Also today we have Dr. Kathryn Foster, who is an author and a psychologist dealing with couples and relationships. She's a very interesting guest. I'm excited to have her on. Now, she will be on right after the music medley. But first, our long-lost Periscope girl has called in and she is going to give us a report. So let's check in with her now. Hello, Periscope girl.
Hi, Captain. Ahoy, brethren. Now, you lovely lot of lamb lovers, I've been feeling quite snug and warm down here in my submarine with my octopus Jenny. While outside in England there's been rushing a gale, blow me down there has, and shiver me timbers, and tornadoes I see in USA, and people have been periscoping it all and sharing it all with the world. This is a good app to have, and you can see it all, even down from here in my little submarine. So happy New Year, shipmates. I've got to weigh anchor now, and say hello to some brethren. Aye. And watch out now for all of those bilge rats that are still on the periscope. Don't forget you can block them by just tapping on their name and hitting block. Ho, 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 yar, yar. Happy New Year!
Okay, Periscope girl, thank you for that report. Glad you and Jenny are well. Glad you're nice and cozy in that submarine of yours. And we will be right back with our music review. Okay, here is Freedom by Bradley Kohn, followed by Carrie Ann by Matt Roden and Acme Giants, and then Gande in 25 Hours.
But that don't mean that you're made forget the things I did. Oh, but Carrie, I hope you come out when you can. Yeah, I miss your smile. I haven't seen you in a while. Oh, Carrie, oh, Carrie, I miss you, Carrie. I hope you come out when you can. I miss you, Carrie.
Wow, great music, huh? Well, I'll tell you a couple of those. If you weren't awake, you're awake after listening to that. The energy level is just amazing on those. All fabulous. Thank you, guys. And we will be right back with Dr. Kathryn Foster after this commercial message.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on epsmusicproductions.com. That's EPPSproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me the spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
Okay, with me today is Kathryn Foster, Ph.D. She is a psychologist in private practice in Fort Worth, Texas, with a master's degree in marriage and family counseling and a Ph.D. in psychology. She has practiced psychotherapy for 27 years. An authority on relationships and how they're changing, she's authored several books, including What Women Want, Really, When Your Relationship Changes, A Woman's Journey, along with The Naked Truth About Men and Romance. She has also authored 2 novels, Sessions, Memoirs of a Psychotherapist, and Finding My Way. Please welcome Dr. Kathryn Foster. Hello. How are you, Dr. Foster?
Hello. Good to be with you.
Great. Glad to have you here. I wanted to just ask you, are you primarily a marriage counselor or a couples therapy counselor? Is that what you do?
I do. I've always done a lot of that, but I am a psychologist, so I do see people for all kinds of reasons.
Okay, so you're not exclusively a couples therapist. You see individuals.
No, I do a lot. I do a lot of individual. I do hypnosis. I treat people with trauma, and so on.
Okay, what is the basic difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Well, a psychiatrist prescribes medication, and most of them don't do psychotherapy. It's confusing to people though, because on TV, you know, they hone in on the psychiatrists from LA or New York City, where they tend to be trained to do psychotherapy. But psychologists are the ones that do psychotherapy. We talk to people, we do some testing, we diagnose. But if people need medicine, we send them to somebody.
I see. So a psychiatrist is actually a medical doctor, where a psychologist maybe would not be.
PhD.
Is a PhD.
Yeah. Psychologists like me, we're PhDs.
No, I get confused, and I think sometimes people get confused.
I think a lot of people do. Yeah. No, and I think there's several states, including like the military, where psychologists do prescribe medicine. So that makes it even more confusing. And I think in 22 of the states, they have legislation related to psychologists prescribing. But most of us who are psychologists, we're very happy doing the psychotherapy part.
Okay, now you've got a lot of interesting things here on your bio, and I kind of arranged it for what I thought would be interesting for my listeners.
Sure.
But one question that I had was, now that gender roles for men and women are much less defined than they were, say, back when my grandmother was young, how has that affected relationships between men and women? How has that changed things?
Yeah. I mean, I think in some ways it's liberated us because we're more free, and individual freedom is very nice. On the other hand, it's brought some confusion, some difficulties. 40% of women now make more than their husbands. So you have to negotiate that in your head. You know, can you still have the same kind of relationship, and how do you negotiate that? There's a lot of things up in the air. And then there's a lot of people that aren't doing official marriages anymore, and kind of the senior population is leading the way because of financial concerns. But, you know, a lot of things are changing. What I talk about in The Naked Truth About Men and Romance is how we still have our very old brains, and we still have to deal with that. You know, we still take our old brains that adapted to the roles we had for 99.9% of human history, and we still take those into our romances, and that has an impact.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, well, most of us know that, you know, men were hunters, women were nurturers for almost all of human history, and there's at least 3 ways that is going to impact a romance. Number one, now I'm doing this from the guy's point of view because The book is called The Naked Truth About Men, okay?
Okay.
So number one is that men had to toughen themselves emotionally to be able to kill and to do battle. I mean, you have to suspend empathy if you're going to go kill Bambi's mother or something. You know, you
I would agree, yeah.
there's still 179 remaining hunter-gatherer societies, and we can actually go look at those. And it's overwhelmingly the guy's job to hunt and make war in those societies. So that's one thing. Men are different related to emotion and empathy. Second, when male hunters killed and pursued animals, their testosterone rose sharply, making their sex drive high. And men have like 10 to 20, sometimes some people say 30 times the amount of testosterone that women do. So that makes them different. It's not only the focus on sex, it also gives them a self-orientation or greater self-interest than what a woman has. In the meantime, while guys were developing their testosterone, doing the hunting and so on, women were doing something almost opposite, and that is they were nurturing kids, and their testosterone remained less developed, and instead their oxytocin rose. Now, oxytocin is that thing that makes you bloom emotionally, and it causes you to be self-sacrificial, to be able to bond, and basically to give. It's everything that a baby needs in a woman. So women have a lot of that. It was important that her sex drive wasn't too high because she needed a high-touch but non-sexual relationship with her children in order to stimulate their brain growth. So that's the second thing, is a difference in testosterone. The third thing is that men developed as silent stalkers of prey because you don't want to rattle the fight or flight syndrome in an animal, you know. So they learned to use language in staccato factual ways. They didn't develop language in the way that women did as teachers of kids and those who were cooperating with other women to go do the gathering. So women came to think of establishing closeness by using dialogue. So men and women are different then in terms of their relationship to language, to the amount of testosterone they have, and to emotion, and especially empathy. So therefore, romance becomes an agreement to meet the needs of someone with different needs. You know, granted, both men and women like to go to restaurants and movies and find intellectual stimulation and have fun, but somewhere in the guts of a romance, you find the essential differences. And these are differences that you have to consciously manage.
Are you saying that women are better communicators in a relationship than men?
I think, well, see, let me talk more about that, because in the exchange between men and women, that can be where a lot of the difficulty comes in. I'll just illustrate this way. If you take two heterosexual women and they go to lunch and they know that they would like to deepen their friendship, we can pretty much predict how they're going to go about it. They're going to share negative emotion. They're going to say things like, you know, I felt so hurt when such and such happened, or, you know, I really hated it when blah, blah, blah took place, or I felt cheated when this happened. So they make disclosures, and they seek to be very real with each other on an emotional level, and that's what makes the friendship flourish.
Okay.
But then you take one of those women, and she's now going to go to dinner with her guy. And again, she really wants to deepen the closeness with him. So she does it in a way that she understands. She does the same thing. She starts talking about her negative emotion and making disclosures. Only it doesn't work, because a part of his brain, his mirror neurons is what we call them, begin jumping up and down and go in search of the fastest way to get her out of distress. Now, he has no idea that he's shutting her down. She doesn't want or need to be fixed like this. She's trying to share and create closeness. It feels like he's just poured cold water over her. So she backs up and she decides, well, okay, that didn't work. So then she tries getting him to talk. But that doesn't work either. Oftentimes, sometimes it does. But his mind tends to be in a neutral state, and he likes it that way. And so she doesn't get anything. Now, women's minds are quite different than that. They're very busy. And so, yes, women do talk more because they have a lot to say.
Okay. Do you think men have more of a difficult time expressing emotion? Is that part
Yes,
of the brain
definitely.
function? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And the reason we now have these sophisticated MRIs that can look at the brain, and they have shown us that by the age of 17, a girl's brain has transformed in the way that a guy's brain never transforms. Okay, so it transforms in terms of the processing of emotion. Her processing moves up to the cerebral cortex, which is where higher mental functioning takes place, like reflection, language, reasoning. So she can now easily explain what she feels and why she feels what she does. She can hook up words to feelings pretty easy. And she can reason or talk through her emotion. See, when this happens to a girl by the time she's 17, her emotional intelligence takes a leap. And she's quite different from a guy. She now thinks her feelings, and she feels her thoughts. So her identity becomes associated with that process of thinking and feeling and expressing it. So negative emotion stays in the primitive brain for males, so that if she asks her 7-year-old son or her 57-year-old husband why he's mad or sad, she's likely to get, I don't feel that, or I don't know. So I really think it's different for men because of the way the brain works for them. Men are often a little suspicious of emotion altogether, and they feel like it's something to be bridled. And the reason is that their emotion, the negative emotion, is coming out of a place in the brain that's more reactive. It's less developed. It's less hooked up to thought, and it's less hooked up to speech. So especially if he's talking to the woman he loves and she sounds upset, he may think that the best thing to do is to try to get her to calm down. Now, unfortunately, what that says to the woman is, you don't care about the essential me. Now, he doesn't mean to do that. But this is why I sometimes joke with men who are in therapy saying that they need a tattoo on one wrist that reminds them to say, you're the most important person in my life. I want to know how you feel.
Oh, that's a good idea. One thing I'm curious about, though, is how does this, because you're talking about this from a very scientific, biological perspective.
Yes.
But aren't there two other factors that might play into how men and women relate to each other? One could be cultural, and the other one, well, now see, this is going to get into another realm because with...
Oh, that's okay. I'm with you.
I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but with homosexual people, be it gay men or lesbian women, your argument or your statements here tend to lead me to believe that there would be biological differences between a gay man and a straight man because of the way that they might process the emotion.
I think somebody should study that, but I would say this, that I am not talking in this book to all men and all women. I'm talking to most men and most women. Okay.
Okay.
But you do have sort of a bell curve thing going on, and you have 17% of men who have what we call, I wish we had a different name, but we call it a feminized brain. And they do have more access. For some reason, they do have more access to their feelings. They also, though, still have high testosterone. So that doesn't make them completely like a woman, or like a woman's brain. So it's complicated. You are right. And yes, there is culture or nurturance or whatever you want to call it. We try to teach people, or they're affected by the current trends, But we do know right now that parents spend twice the amount of time trying to talk to little boys about emotional, relational things, like teaching them it's okay to apologize or something like that. And it doesn't seem to have an effect. Now, I would say that my daughter and son-in-law are raising a son, and they've gone way beyond doing it twice as much than they have to their girl, you know. Of course, they've read my books. They're probably scared to death, right? But, but he does talk in a more relational way. That child, he is. Of course, you know, you have to realize the people he has in his life. But yes, that's the effect of culture. But the thing is, he's 4. Now, he's got about a cup of circulating testosterone going through his body every day. But by the time he turns somewhere between 9 and 15, he's going to have 2 gallons a day. Huge change. And that, you know, that all that testosterone flowing through livens certain parts of the brain. And it causes him to grow. Like, for instance, in this case, the hypothalamus in a boy, after he starts having the 2 gallons, grows over, you know, about 2.5 times that of a girl. Now, what that does is it pushes sexual conquest to the front of his thinking. And it also causes him to be more grounded or oriented in himself. Now, I was just telling you, at about the same time in a girl's life, she's going through this change where her feelings get hooked up to her thinking. So you have whatever culture is doing, you know, and I'm not dismissing that it has an effect. I mean, for instance, homicide would be much higher if we didn't have laws that prevent it,
Sure.
for instance,
Yeah.
you know. So we step in as a society and we make rules and laws, and we have mores that people become sensitive to, and that does affect our behavior, but we still have a brain that's oriented. I'll give another example of that. Today, men are 4 times more likely than a woman to see sex and emotional closeness as the same thing. Now, see, women don't do that. Sex and emotional closeness are 2 separate things, and for a woman, right? And emotional closeness can lead to sex. And then sex is symbolic of the emotional closeness she feels. And the emotional closeness she feels comes out of the dialogue she has with a guy, typically.
Wow.
I know,
That's very surprising because
okay.
I was always under the impression, and to be honest, for myself personally, now you're saying sex and emotion. I'm going to use a different word there. And I don't know if this is going to change the conversation or not and the meaning of it, but sex and love have always been very 2 different things for me. Sex, I can disconnect to the point of having sex simply for the sake of sex with somebody I don't even like. You know, it's just...
Yes, that is a male gifting, by the way.
Okay.
That men can do that. You're absolutely right. But I think I'm talking about, when this survey was done, I think they're talking about when a man is in a relationship that he wants to be in, you know, in that case.
Oh, I see.
Then he sees sex and emotional closeness as the same thing. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Well, it's a little confusing because when you say emotional closeness, I immediately think of love, or in a loving type relationship where, you know, men can go out and just have sex with a complete stranger and not say a word. I mean, not that women can't or don't, but it's typically more of a male thing.
What is so confusing to women is that you're right. Men can really disconnect.
Yeah.
So inside of a relationship, of a committed, loving relationship, okay, she doesn't always understand or get it when he seeks sex to make closeness.
Well, I don't know if even closeness. I'm not sure why men would just go out and have sex and then go home on their own. I mean, we could say it's a biological function. We could say, you know, too much testosterone, cultural double standards where, you know, it's like a good thing how many sexual partners a man can knock off. But if a woman does it, she's You know, she's a loose woman. And I think there has always been a double standard, at least in the Western world for that.
There certainly has. However, I must say that men's medial preoptic area in the brain is 2.5 times greater than a female's, and that relates to the sexual hunt. That's kind of why, you know, you have in self-help books, they tell the women to let the guy, at least at the beginning of the relationship, pursue her. And it might turn him off if he doesn't feel the hunt.
Oh, so that's all part of it. Okay, see, human sexuality is so complex. We could spend, you know, a whole series just talking about that.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different things that people are turned on to. Sex is as much visual stimulus, pornography, all this kind of thing, which has nothing to do with procreation, if you want to go back to the biological function. So
it's a powerful drive.
Yeah. So is it safe to say that men have a much stronger drive for the actual act than women do?
Yes, they do. That is very safe to say. And there's this other part of the brain that's more active in males actually during sex, and it contributes to intense pleasure. So even if a woman is like a multiple orgasm or she seems to really like sex, she may value sex less than her guy does. And this is to the consternation of many men. I've had many men say in therapy, you know, I just don't get it. You know, she orgasms, she seems to like sex, but you know, it's not really high on her list. An awful lot of men wish there was more sexual frequency. But you understand what happens is that oxytocin, remember that's the thing that's high in women, actually cuts off testosterone. It actually cuts it off. So that nurturing thing that comes out of women is kind of not completely, but it is kind of opposite of what testosterone does.
So if you were to ask women, like take a survey, which would they choose as a priority one, sex or security in a relationship?
I have seen some studies on sex versus friendship, and they'll take the friendship, but I don't know about security. Well,
I guess what I mean by security is in the classic sense of the man is going to be there, he's going to be faithful, he's going to be a good father, he's going to take care of the family, he's not going to go fool around, he's not going to go out and get drunk every night and driving home. Somebody who's stable, somebody who works, who comes home, you know, like a normal, what I would consider a normal life. You know, whose priority is for her and the children and their family unit.
Now she's choosing between that and sex, did you say?
As a priority, not exclusive.
Yeah, not exclusive. I think she would take what you just described.
She would take security over this. Okay.
And the faithfulness and
the commitment.
Because her drive to make the family stable is so high.
Okay.
That old nesting.
Now, see, this is a valid point that somebody could bring up for saying that, you know, gay couples shouldn't have children, particularly gay men, because they wouldn't have that from a biological standpoint. But I've seen gay men who had children, biological and adopted children, who had very beautiful families.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, I've seen that too, and you don't know, you know, like I said, 17% of men have a different type of brain. Then there's about 30% of them that have what we call a balanced brain, which means that they have more empathy than most guys, you know. So it could be those who are seeking out to care for children, those types of people.
I think the jury is still out on a lot of this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
Because, you know, where you've got people trying to apply politics and laws to all of this, and the big fight in this country this year over gay marriage and, you know, now that it is legal. But I think there's still a lot of questions that people have. And I think even with men and women, obviously with your books and with what we've been talking about for the last half an hour, there's still a lot of questions. But I guess this leads to the question of what men can do to be successful with women.
Yes.
So what do you think about that?
One thing they can do is get my book called What Women Want Really! ! Because that book is written for guys. It's bullet pointed. It's brief, and but it's meant to be read as a couple because it has discussion questions for her to answer, and it allows for some of that dialogue that is going to fire the intimacy, and it also gives him specific skills so that he can be successful with a woman. I mean, men are fueled by wins, WINS, because when they win, when they know they're doing something right, when they've applied a skill and it worked, then they have an upping of dopamine, which makes you feel good about yourself and open to the world and interested. And then the dopamine, in turn, causes your testosterone to go up. So a guy feels masculine. He feels good about himself. He feels confident when he does something right.
You know, that's funny. I just want to cut in there because I have seen more guys get really horny after they hit big at a blackjack table.
Yeah.
And now I see why. Okay. There's actually a chemical reaction that's doing it.
You also see a lot of powerful politicians who also make sexual faux pas. It kind of, that winning goes along with sex.
Okay.
High testosterone. Yeah,
that's good to know.
Definite. I think if a guy wants to improve his relationship or if he thinks it's stuck, he needs to know that it's going to be language that will be the key to fixing it. He might think it's sex, but it's usually language. And he can say, honey, I want to catch up with what's going on in your life. Can we talk? And then as she's talking, look for opportunities to ask, and how do you feel about that? You know, the biggest thing he can do really is offer her empathy, just to be there together with her and offer some empathy. That does so much for a woman. It makes her really understand that she's loved.
Okay. All right. That's good to know.
Well, there's something else I really like, and that is if a guy searches for something to do as a couple that sparks emotion in her, but he enjoys too, you know, and it could be reading aloud together or dancing or having dinner parties or pursuing spirituality or raising a garden. It doesn't really matter, but it engages her emotionally, and for him it's a shared activity without conflict, and that dovetails to bring closeness. And women can learn, you know, by reading The Naked Truth About Men and Romance, a lot of things about men's brains. But one is that she doesn't have to work so hard. A lot of women work awfully hard and become exhausted in their relationships because his mind is often in neutral, and she doesn't have to keep up a dialogue. She doesn't have to. She can just rest. And as she rests, that fuels her sexual arousal, and so it works. It just works well if she does rest more.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and this is actually that was kind of fortuitous because I was going to bring up something regarding my grandparents and what happens to people who have been together for years and years and years. I can remember as a little kid going over to their house, and they would sit there for hours. I mean, they were retired at this point. And they would just sit there for hours and not say a word to each other. Not a word. You know, he would have the TV on and she would be curled up on the couch with a book. And they would do this like every single day. And then, you know, at 12 o'clock, she'd get up and fix lunch. And, you know, this was like their routine for 20 some odd years after my grandfather retired.
Wow.
Now, I know that people have said that married couples run out of things to talk about. And there's different opinions on how long that happens. I know for me personally, it would seem to have been about 3 or 4 years. and then we just stopped talking because there was nothing left to talk about. And it's interesting, but I don't know if that's like you were saying, where the woman can just shut down.
Do you know that 412 different mutually exclusive feelings have been identified? And women feel more strongly and more often than men do, of course. And they have a connection to those feelings that's really strong. So yeah, women do tend to need to talk more. and as she talks, her feelings rise. So she wants to have that validated, or she wants to at least have him be interested in that part of her.
I guess, for me, I can go off into a corner and do things on my own for hours and be perfectly fine. But it seems like that doesn't always work. And then I get this nagging feeling like I'm ignoring,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And there's a difference in how introverted and how extroverted couples are, The thing that usually works is just asking, honey, are your needs getting met? Are we talking enough? Is there anything you need to talk to me about? I mean, just a guy offering that means a lot. And he can kind of hold the space for her to talk, just hold the space. He doesn't have to do a lot. He just sort of puts it out there. Is there anything you want to talk about? It's women who say that. We need to talk. We need to talk about the relationship.
Yeah.
Whatever. But if a guy does it, it has the feeling of, it has that power of making her feel loved because he cares.
Do you think women need that reassurance more often than men do?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think, let me explain that. Women have more self-doubt. The term we use, cocksure. Have you ever heard that?
Oh, yeah.
That's about men. Men being confident, because testosterone does make you confident. What oxytocin does is it makes you leave yourself and get into the shoes of somebody else pretty easily. It also makes you sacrifice for somebody else. So, yeah, women, see, what naturally goes with that is self-doubt. So, yes, women do need to be told, you look beautiful today. They need to be assured, I'm so glad I married you.
No, it's interesting. And I think that obviously your book covers this in great deal.
Yes, right. The Naked Truth About Men and Romance just explains what happens in romance because of the brain structure differences. The book, What Women Want, really tells you more what to do about that or how to make it work. Because like I said toward the beginning, we have to manage our brains. We have to be conscious and manage them. Now, we all know that in terms of, now this is an extreme, but in terms of killing somebody, we know to manage that one, right?
Right.
But and of course that's extreme. But are the things that relate to what a romance is made out of, we often don't manage that because we're really not aware. And one thing that really drove me to write The Naked Truth About Men and Romance is that 2/3 of divorces are brought on by women, which is really, a statistic that's really out there. I mean, so many more women initiate it than men. What's going on? Why are they so frustrated? Why are they so unhappy? And of course, it really comes down to a woman's brain is organized to be very affiliative or relational. His brain is organized to be more competitive or power oriented or oriented toward those wins that I was talking about. So she gets frustrated that she expected the relationship to be much more relational.
Right. Okay.
See what little girls do before they start having boyfriends and everything. They have relationships that focus on each other, and their dialogue is rich, and they make self-disclosures as a key to building the friendship. So when a girl comes into a romance, that's what she assumes is going to happen because she's going to be closer to her husband than to anybody, right? So she expects emotional closeness through dialogue and empathic listening that includes his tuning in to ask relevant questions and watching for the rise of feelings in her as she talks and staying with her verbally and non-verbally. Because that's what she got as a kid. She got used to that.
Right.
But see, boys, when boys are growing up, they tend to like to function in groups and center around competitive activities of some kind. They minimize conversation and establish hierarchy, and personal revelations are most certainly discouraged. So guys come into that with a whole different set of expectations. So how do we bring this all together?
It's interesting. But on the other hand, long before there was any of this conversation and scientific discovery, men and women got together and stayed together. So what were they doing right?
They did. Well, I don't know. I think for one thing, their expectations were incredibly different. We now marry for romance, and we don't have to marry. If we don't marry to have children necessarily. We don't marry to be financially secure necessarily. That a lot of that is going by the wayside. So now we only have one thing left, and that is you marry because you want to, because you want to feel certain things with that person. You want to have romance. You want to have closeness.
Well, that's a good point, because you're right. Really, people in those days married because they were expected to. And women really had to get married if they expected to. They looked for a man to take care of them financially. I can remember having that discussion with my grandmother. You know, she said at 16 years old, I said, well, what were you thinking about when you were 16 years old? And she said, finding a good man, a good provider.
Yeah.
That was exactly what she said. And that was it.
So you've been interviewing people your whole life.
Well, I guess so. Yeah. And it just was interesting to me because my parents were both working, which even in those days was a little unusual, but they were kind of ahead of it. But my grandparents were really very, very traditional. To think of that now, for a woman to say that, I mean, I guess there are still women, maybe not so much in the Western world. If you would heard a woman say at 16 years old, I'm looking for a good man to be a good provider.
Yeah.
And that was her only goal in life, you would think of her as a little bit,
oh my.
Yeah, a little oh my. And the fact that she got married, my grandmother got married at 16 to my grandfather who was 18, and everybody thought, oh, that's fine. That's like the right time for them to get married. This was in the early 20s, right? Now, you know, if a 16-year-old wanted to get married, oh boy. Yeah.
No.
So I guess, I guess in that sense as well, the definition of marriage has been evolving.
It has, I think,
and it continues to evolve.
There are still people who gain so much out of commitment, out of sacrificing for one another, out of building a history together, you know, out of stretching to understand one another. You know, I think that marriage is still relevant, but we have to talk a lot more to understand what our expectations are.
Now, in the modern marriage scenario, where the man and the woman are both working full-time jobs, the woman, in a sense, has taken on the role of the man in her 9 to 5, where she's going to be competitive with other people in the office. Then when she comes home, is she going to have to switch gears real quick, or is that going to come naturally?
That is a difficulty. I mean, not only the relationship, but for her personally, because she is entering usually a work system that has been formulated by men.
Right.
And she has to adapt to that. It's not really her style. I mean, most workplaces have to do with the bottom line. They're not real relational. They have to do with competition.
Right.
And she doesn't necessarily. She's much more affiliative. She'd like a a warmer environment. And of course, the studies on female managers do talk about how the female managers do create a great deal of warmth in the workplace, and it escalates productivity.
That's
It
interesting.
does.
Yeah.
It does help, you know. But yeah, in terms of her changing gears when she comes home, I think it's best for her to do that. Best for her health and her, you know, her brain and everything. She needs, you know, women need free-flowing dialogue, and they need friendships with other women, because when two women get together, they both have circulating oxytocin, which causes them to be open, to bond, to kind of have a no-holds-barred kind of friendship, kind of two souls connecting. Yeah, men have a more competitive relationship with one another. It doesn't usually allow for that kind of freedom. And if a woman is so busy working and being a wife and raising kids and everything that she doesn't have time for female friendships, she can really suffer.
Do you think men have more ego than women do?
Yeah, they do, because testosterone causes you to be more into yourself and to know what you want. Like, we know from studies that men are 8 times more likely to negotiate an opening salary, you know, a beginning salary, than are women. Because they're sure. And it doesn't, the woman may have way more qualifications, but she still won't do it.
She'll just typically accept whatever they offer her without Oh, I see. What you mean. Okay.
Yeah. Whereas a guy, even with much less qualification, feels very sure, very confident in himself, and will try negotiating the salary.
Who do you think is more territorial, women or men?
Oh, males are definitively. I mean, they have the DPN is a place in the brain. You don't want to know the whole real word.
That's all right.
But you know, that's definitely more one up, more territorial. They seek out their turf, you know, and that's much more developed in males than it is in females.
What about when another woman is hitting on your man? Women can get pretty nasty, I think.
That's different.
I mean,
she's got a lot to lose, right?
I think women are more territorial in that instance.
Yeah, I hear you.
Because I've seen women get really vicious. Well, listen, Dr. Foster, we've had a great conversation, but we've got to cut this off. Can you please tell everybody where they can find you and find your website and books and things?
The books are all on Amazon.com. You can just put the book in. You can also, if you want to, go to my website, which is KathrynFosterPhD.com. And Kathryn is spelled Kathryn. And then click on books, and it will take you to all of them.
Okay, super.
The novels and all of them. So.
Are you on Facebook and Twitter as well?
You know, I think I am. I know I am. Yes, I am.
Okay.
In fact, I think I sent you a link to that, didn't I?
I did get your Twitter link. I don't know about Facebook, but.
Well, if you need it, just let me know.
Okay.
We'll email it to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Dr. Kathryn Foster, and thank you to Bradley Kohn, Matt Roden of Acme Giants, and Joe Gande. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.
To the